Hulk Hogan, you don't deserve more money than me. Vince McMahon, I'm penning this letter to say that if you don't compensate me and give me exactly what I want, I will take the spaceship with the rocket fuel. I will shove that plane into a nosedive. Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon, and I will unleash the power of the Warriors on other promotions. You will not be able to stop the power of the Warriors.
So what if he hadn't held up Vince for money? What would have happened? Dear God, it must have been tiring being him. Anyway, I'm John Rednum, my real honest thoughts on what if Ultimate Warrior had not held up Vince for more money at SummerSlam 1991. Thank you very much to whoever suggested this, because good God, thank you. I forgot how tiring it is to try and do an Ultimate Warrior impression. Yeah, so for those who don't remember the timeline, Ultimate Warrior had been WWF Champion at WrestleMania 6, crowned in the Ultimate Challenge, and then didn't really have the best run because they didn't set him up the best. They had him face people that he'd already faced, and then he lost it to Sergeant Slaughter at the Royal Rumble 1991 because Vince McMahon wanted to, play up the Persian Gulf War. That didn't work all that good. Slaughter was a champion, faced off against Hogan, patriotism abound, and Ultimate Warrior faced off against Randy Savage at WrestleMania 7, and then had a series of vignettes with Jake Snake Roberts was facing The Undertaker on house shows, and then held up Vince McMahon for more money at SummerSlam 1991 because he deserved more. God damn it, he deserved more. He had gotten way more money from Vince and really any promoter than he ever goddamn deserved, because you know my opinion on the Ultimate Warrior, and I once again say fuck the Ultimate Warrior. I'm glad he's dead. That being said, putting all that aside for now, he was a big star. But was he as big of a star by SummerSlam 91 as he was even like at WrestleMania 6? No, he wasn't. Now, part of that was creative. Part of that was the fact that really once he won the title, then what? Then what do you do? Because it was the Ultimate Challenge. It was a big moment, but it didn't matter because it was all focused around Hogan. Warrior faced off against Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, various others, and then lost the title, like I said. But let's talk about his career. So yeah, he had a bodybuilding fetish from an early age. His dad had cheated on his mother with a neighbor. He had gone and done whatever he had done as far as like trying to build a happy, new, wealthy life. He got into bodybuilding. He met his first wife, talked about on Dark Side of the Ring, and moved out to California to be a bodybuilder, and then was discovered for having a fantastic body. And him and Sting and a couple other people were sent out by this freaking goddamn goof, whose name I'm not even going to mention. And they were sent out, with 8x10s, like, bring these guys into your promotion, please. They look really good. They're going to be stars. It turned out that guy was right. But that being said, it's not exactly like Warrior was ever necessarily great. Jim Hellwig, as it were. Steve Borden was. Steve Borden, by the way, would become Sting. But they went to Memphis, did not have very good matches because they were green. And also, at that point, Sting would listen. Hellwig didn't. So they went to Mid-South. That didn't necessarily work either because Sting would listen, Hellwig didn't. So he went to World Class. He did all the stuff that he did, being the Dingo Warrior and all that, and was managed by Gary Hart, but then he would just go off and do whatever he did as far as, just being, doing goofy, impressive shit, but that didn't last very long. Vince McMahon decided to bring him in as a Dingo Warrior, but that was dropped, and decided to call him the Ultimate Warrior, because Kerry Von Erich is modern day warrior and all that, and there were other warriors. There were the Road Warriors. There were other warriors. There would be Power Warrior later on. Kensuke Sasaki, when Hawk and Animal split for a little bit. The Legion of Doom. So yeah, Warrior became the Ultimate Warrior. And at first, his matches were kept short and sweet as far as squashes. And then he would make no sense on promos. None of his promos ever made any sense. Anytime his promos tried to make sense, all he would end up doing is coming across like an unlikable douche. He knew how to market himself. I will say that. WWE knew how to market him. He knew how to market himself. It was a flash in the pan thing because it wasn't going to last, but you smash him over everybody. You just have every veteran get beat up decisively, keep it short and sweet, and accentuate the strengths and hide the weaknesses. And that worked. And it worked for Warrior for a while. I mean, he faced off against Hercules at WrestleMania 4. And then he was continuing to rise up. He was the surprise challenger for Honky Tonk Man's Intercontinental Championship at SummerSlam 88. And that was a big deal. And that was a big pop. And it was a big moment for his career. It was a big deal for me as a kid. Still a big moment to watch now. Crowd lost it. You know, and he did all that and won the Intercontinental Championship in a few seconds, which honestly is how long Honky Tonk Man should have held the championship, not for 15 months. And he held the title, and he was still having short matches. He was still doing this, and he was still doing the stuff he did on the house shows. But you know what? He was a champion. It wasn't even like a smash you over build in the sense of him being champion, because otherwise Vince would have made him champion at WrestleMania 4. He didn't do that. He waited about almost a year, made him champion. Then he lost it to Rick Rude at Mania 5, and then won it back at SummerSlam 89. Of course, one of the parts that I just skipped over was the super pose down where they're doing the thing and they doing all that and everything. They did the super pose down. Warrior continued to be more goofy and ridiculous, but he was popular with kids, and he certainly sold a lot of merch. He sold a lot of merch, because that's one thing Vince McMahon knew how to do, was market. He got the right marketing people. And Warrior was perfect for that time. He was. And then he was Intercontinental Champion after SummerSlam 89. Hogan was still the WWF Champion after beating Randy Savage at WrestleMania 5. Still hate that. Savage should have held it till at least SummerSlam 89. Because Hogan didn't need another year-long run, or nearly a year-long run. And then they had the Royal Rumble 1990 clash, where they're both facing off. There is not a person sitting down. Everyone is standing. Great call by Tony Schiavone, by the way. And just enough of a tease. And they continued to build it until it was WWF Champion, Intercontinental Champion, title for title, Ultimate Challenge in the Skydome. Warrior won. Hogan kicking out at 3 1/4. But still, 1, 2, 3, he beat him. That was something. And the fact that it got pulled up, because Hogan could work, Warrior could do impressive shit. But I'll say this, on that night, they both created magic. They didn't create magic at Halloween Havoc 1998, but I digress. And then from there, he was a champion. He faced off against Rick Rude at SummerSlam 90. And they did the stuff at Survivor Series 1990, where he was teaming up with Kerry Von Erich and the Road Warriors and everything. All the Warriors! The Mania 6 promo about shoving the plane into a nosedive. Hogan was still weird, and I don't understand exactly what the hell he was saying. But that being said, Ultimate Warrior was riding high, and then they decided to take the title away from him when Sergeant Slaughter beat him, and Randy Savage hit him in the head with the goddamn scepter, and it was hilarious. What was more hilarious was Sensational Sherry offering to do something for the Warrior and even getting on her knees in front of him, and not gonna say, boy, Sherry, Jesus. It was funny. It created quite the meme. It's like, just doing it and I'll do anything you ask him, Warrior. No! And Randy Savage, he said no. He's throwing stuff around. And then he hits him in the head with a scepter. And the Warrior does absolutely no selling of it right after the 3 count. Runs, holding his head and everything, and running to the back. And then is trying to get at Randy Savage. And then from there, they build this whole thing to a retirement match where Ultimate Warrior beats him, puts his foot on his chest, and does that. Faces off against Undertaker in a series of body bag matches on the house show circuit. And during this time, building up to the match made in hell. The wedding's on next. What? You said the match made in hell? Will you be serious? It's Hogan and Warrior against Slaughter, Adnan, and and Colonel Mustafa, who was the Iron Sheik, by the way. Why they didn't call him the Iron Sheik, I don't know. And Sid Justice was going to be the special guest referee. During this time, Warrior basically penned a letter to Vince McMahon because he felt that he deserved to be compensated more. Even though he had gotten way more money from Vince than most people did, he felt, God damn it, I deserve more. And also at this time, he was divorced from his first wife because he had cheated on her a bunch, including with Melanie Pillman. Yeah. Then he got with a stupid conservative twat like Dana Warrior. But let's just keep that to the side. Let's talk about the fact he penned that letter to Vince. Basically holding him up for money. Vince McMahon got to get the match in the ring. He acquiesced to every single demand. Was going to pay him a whole bunch and do all this. And of course, Jake the Snake Roberts came up with the bullshit thing of what was going to happen and what was going to happen after that. I was going to face Warrior. It was going to be a title program. Warrior wasn't going to be in the title program. He wasn't even going to be in the hunt for the Intercontinental title, not for the world title. If he was in the hunt for the world title, it wasn't going to be with Jake because Hogan was the champion. So I think Jake probably, pilled himself out of his mind to the point that he tried to remember that. Now, he was going to work with Warrior, and it might have been a big money program because Warrior was a big guy as far as a big star. But after holding Vince up for money, Warrior runs back. Vince McMahon says, by the way, you're fired. Get the hell out of my company. He actually suspended him, and he was off until WrestleMania 8. And then everything was totally different. You have to wonder what plans got thrown up. But let's just say what happened if Ultimate Warrior had not done that. Or if Ultimate Warrior said, Vince, please, I deserve to be compensated the same as Hogan. Not demanding, not saying he wouldn't show up, but just demanding that he gets a chance to show up, or that he gets a chance to be compensated the same. Please, can we work this out? If he had been nice about it. Vince would have been nice about it. I think Vince would have been nice about it because Warrior, even though he was a buffoon, would have been able to convince Vince, that is, that things could have worked out. So what would he have done? He would have worked with Jake the Snake Roberts, and that would have been a hell of a goddamn program. Could have gone for a few months. You still could have gone with Jake the Snake Roberts and Randy Savage, and Warrior could have helped save Savage or something like that. Warrior could have been part of the Royal Rumble 1992. Warrior, his star had peaked a little bit earlier as it was, but he was still valuable to the company. And he honestly torpedoed his own goddamn career well before he should have. And well before it could have just totally flamed out. He could have gone to 1992. The problem is they were starting to get popped for the wellness violations and, all the, the government coming down on the steroid stuff. So he would have had to have basically gotten off the shit. Still worked out, but been leaner, like when he showed back up at WrestleMania 8. Ultimately, he was too much of a head case and was probably going to do this stuff and flame out anyway. But let's just say he'd been part of the 92 Rumble and still been in the hunt and maybe, competed for the Intercontinental Championship. Maybe you could have still had him in feuds like with The Undertaker. You could have done various things with Warrior because he was still valuable at that point, even though he'd only been with the company for, 4 goddamn years. But then he got popped, of course. Him and Davey got popped for wellness violations or buying steroids from a guy in the UK, and he got released in November of 92 and didn't return until March of 1996. Warrior probably would have been gone by 1993, 1994 because Vince was going with youth, and also Warrior wouldn't have fit in all that much. Had he stayed around, though, work with Taker, work with Jake in the Mania, you could have had Warrior versus Jake at Mania. That would have been kind of goddamn cool. Would have been a way to blow that off. Undertaker could have been in the mix with somebody else. I talked about Undertaker's possible WWF Championship run going into Mania in another video. And then he could have had that Papa Shango feud, which was absolute dog shit. He could have faced Shawn Michaels in a series of matches. Now, that would have certainly been interesting because Shawn, if he didn't want to work with Vader, he definitely wouldn't have wanted to work with Warrior. He would have been able to do so much else, but he would have had to put people over, and I don't think he would have done that. He could have faced Flair. Flair versus Warrior would have certainly been interesting on the house show circuit. Perfect wouldn't have been working with him at that point. Hogan was gone from the company. He could have worked with Brett. He could have worked with Davey. We could have had Warrior and Bulldog as a team. That way it would have been a big old power trip. There are a lot of things they could have done with Warrior in 92 had he, not totally flamed out and become a goddamn, mental case and just gone absolutely insane and thought he was worth more money than he actually was. There were ways to work with Warrior. Now, by 93, he probably would have been totally out the door. Mania 9 might have been the last appearance that he had, but they could have gotten another 18 months out of that guy. They could have had him he could have faced Razor. He could have, they could have had him face Lex Luger in some of the first matches. How interesting would that have been? Lex Luger is a narcissist, or narcissist, as Heenan said. Hogan, or, Warrior versus Luger in a series of, body pose downs and everything. Sign me the hell up. Ultimately, I think it's probably good that he left the company when he did, because he didn't necessarily feel fresh when he came back, but he felt like a relic by the time he left. He was still over, but it was obvious that the magic was gone. Various scenarios could have happened. He could have been in the mix and worked with a whole bunch of people. He never would have been the WWF champion again. Why? To what end? Who else was he going to work against? Undertaker had already turned face by 92. Jake was gone from the company. There weren't a lot of heels he could work against. He could have worked against Shawn, But Shawn would have probably not wanted to work with him. I mean, Randy Savage could have worked with him because Randy could get the most out of anybody. Piper was gone from the company. Hogan was gone from the company. So many people were gone from the goddamn company that ultimately Warrior staying around might have actually hurt the company more, even if you could have done some things with him feuding with various people, as I mentioned. He could have put Bret over at Royal Rumble 1993, like Bret had talked about. That would have been interesting. Ultimately, it's all up in the air. I think Warrior could have been valuable to the company for a little bit, but by 93, by Mania 9, he would have been done. He would have been totally done. You could have had him come back in 96, and then it would have totally flamed out like that. Warrior, I'm not even going to say it was a flash in the pan in a bad way, but by 93, so many other workhorses were around, he would have felt just passé. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.